I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years, saved every penny, and finally bought my dream house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, perfect for starting my independent life after years of watching my family coddle my unemployed brother Tyler and his freeloading family. The congratulations lasted exactly 48 hours. "David, we need to talk," Mom said, sitting me down like I was about to be disciplined. "Your house is too small. You need to return it and buy something bigger." "Bigger for what?" Dad jumped in. "Tyler's family needs stability. 3 kids can't keep living in our basement forever. We've found some lovely 5-bedroom houses that would work perfectly for everyone." Everyone. That's when I realized they weren't talking about family visits. Tyler leaned back in his chair with that smug smile I'd seen my whole life. "I already measured the bedrooms, bro. The kids would need the 2 bigger ones, and Jessica and I would take the master. You'd be fine with the smaller room." Jessica was scrolling through real estate listings on her phone. "This one has a great layout," she said, showing me houses that cost twice what I'd paid. "The family room is huge, perfect for when we're all watching movies together. The kids really need space to play." They were planning to move into my house like I was their new landlord. My 32-year-old golden brother, who'd never paid rent in his life, was measuring bedrooms in the house I'd just bought with my own money, while his wife picked out furniture arrangements. "That's nice, David," Mom said, when I tried to explain that I'd bought the house for myself. "But family comes first. We're family." But here's what my family didn't know about their golden child's latest housing demand. They were about to discover exactly who controlled the family finances now, and why their precious Tyler should have learned to be self-sufficient a long time ago. Understanding my family's housing demand requires understanding Tyler's entire life story. From the moment he was born, my parents treated him like he could do no wrong. When Tyler struggled in high school, they hired tutors and blamed the teachers. When he couldn't decide on a college major, they paid for him to explore his interests for 6 years, while accumulating credits in everything from art history to business management. They covered his full tuition, $42,000 over those 6 years. When he finally graduated with a degree in communications, they threw him a party and bought him a new car to start his professional journey. When his first job lasted 3 months, they explained to relatives that Tyler was finding his passion. When his second job lasted 6 weeks, it became the wrong cultural fit. Every failure was reframed as a learning experience. Every setback was someone else's fault. Tyler's resume looked like a career fair gone wrong. But in my parents' eyes, he was just too creative and talented for traditional employment. Tyler was the golden brother who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was working part-time jobs through high school, paying my own way through college with student loans that I'm still paying off today. When I graduated with a degree in finance, there was no party. When I landed my first job, there was no new car. When I got promoted, the family response was brief and polite. "That's nice, David," became the standard family reaction to any achievement of mine. New job. "That's nice, David." Promotion. "That's nice, David." Pay raise. "That's nice, David." It was like my successes were background music to Tyler's ongoing drama series. I never asked my parents for money after college, because I could see they were already stretched thin, supporting Tyler's lifestyle. I moved into a studio apartment, bought used furniture, and built my life one paycheck at a time. Independence wasn't a choice. It was survival in a family where financial support flowed in one direction. Every success was met with, "That's nice, David." The pattern became clear over the years. Tyler's problems required immediate family intervention. His car broke down. Dad would drive across town to deal with the mechanic and cover the repair costs. His utilities got shut off. Mom would call the companies to arrange payment plans and cover the deposits. When he couldn't make rent, well, that's how he ended up back in their basement. They treated his financial emergencies like natural disasters, unpredictable events that required family disaster relief rather than consequences of poor decision-making. Every crisis came with built-in excuses: the economy, bad bosses, impossible landlords, unexpected expenses. The word accountability never appeared in conversations about Tyler's problems. The word responsibility was reserved for discussions about what the rest of the family owed him. Mom and Dad treated Tyler's problems like natural disasters. I was so proud when I called to tell them about the house. After 3 years of saving, I'd finally closed on a perfect 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch in a quiet neighborhood. The mortgage was manageable. The inspection was clean, and I'd even negotiated the seller down $5,000. It felt like the first major milestone of my adult life. "I got the keys today," I told Mom over the phone. "You should see the kitchen. It's completely updated with granite counters and stainless appliances. The master bedroom has a walk-in closet bigger than my current apartment." "That's wonderful, honey. How many bedrooms did you say?" 3. Perfect for me, plus a home office and a guest room for when people visit. There was a pause. "Only 3 bedrooms. Mom." "I live alone. 3 bedrooms is plenty." "Well, we'll have to see about that." "Why don't you come over this weekend so we can all discuss your new place?" The way she said discuss should have been my first warning. I thought they'd be happy for me not calculating square footage. Saturday's discussion turned into what I can only describe as a family housing conference. Mom had printed out floor plans from the realtor's website. Dad had researched comparable homes in my neighborhood. Tyler and Jessica were there with notebooks like they were preparing for a business meeting about my personal property. "Here's the issue." Dad began spreading the floor plans across their dining room table. 3 bedrooms simply isn't enough for family gatherings. Where would Tyler's family stay when they visit? The kids can't sleep on couches and Tyler and Jessica need privacy. They can visit for the day and go back to their place, I suggested. "Their place," Jessica laughed. "David, we're living in your parents' basement. We don't exactly have space to host family dinners." Tyler jumped in. "Besides, wouldn't it be nice to have somewhere the whole family could gather comfortably?" The kids love spending time with Uncle David. The kids who barely knew my name because I was never included in family activities. But suddenly, I was supposed to be the family gathering coordinator. "Look at these houses," Mom said, pulling up new listings. "This 4-bedroom has a great open concept for entertaining. This 5-bedroom has a finished basement where the kids could play. Much better for our family." Our family. They said the house wasn't big enough for family gatherings. Over the next week, the pressure campaign began in earnest. Every phone call, every text message, every family interaction somehow circled back to my housing situation and how it affected Tyler's family. "I keep thinking about the kids," Mom said during our Tuesday phone call. "They're growing so fast and they really need stability. Living in a basement isn't healthy for children long term. They need their own space, their own rooms where they can develop properly." The kids. Suddenly, Tyler's 3 children, who my parents had never seemed particularly concerned about before, became the emotional center of every conversation. 8-year-old Emma needed a quiet space for homework. 6-year-old Jake needed room to play with his toys. 4-year-old Sophie needed a proper bedroom instead of a corner of the basement. "You have to think about what kind of uncle you want to be," Dad added during our Thursday dinner. "Family takes care of family. That's what we do. We're family." Jessica started sending me texts with photos of cramped basement corners where the kids did homework. "This is Emma's study space," read one message showing a folding table next to the water heater. "She deserves better than this, don't you think?" They kept saying, "We're family," like it explained everything. The guilt campaign reached its peak when Tyler himself finally approached me directly. He knocked on my apartment door Sunday afternoon with a tape measure and his phone ready to get down to business. "So I've been thinking about the bedroom situation," he said, walking past me into my living room like he owned the place. "Emma and Jake could share the bigger guest room if we put in bunk beds. Sophie's still young enough for a smaller room. Jessica and I would obviously need the master bedroom since we're the parents." I stared at him. "You're planning bedroom arrangements for my house?" "Well, yeah. I want to make sure it'll work before you commit to a bigger place. Have you thought about storage?" "Jessica has a lot of craft supplies, and I'll need space for my home office setup." "Your home office?" "I'm launching a consulting business. I'll need a dedicated workspace that's quiet and professional looking for video calls with clients." My unemployed brother asked when he could start looking at bedroom layouts. The absurdity was breathtaking. Tyler was treating my potential house purchase like an apartment hunting expedition, where I was his personal real estate agent and landlord combined. When I tried to explain that I'd bought my current house for myself, not as family housing, the conversation took a sharp turn toward my financial obligations. "David, let's be realistic here," Mom said during our next family meeting. "You make good money. You don't have kids. You don't have major expenses. This could be a smart investment for you. A larger house will appreciate better than that little place you bought." Dad nodded along. "Think of it as an investment in family. You help Tyler's family get stable property values in better neighborhoods or stronger, and everyone wins. But plus," Jessica added, "we could help with maintenance and upkeep. Tyler's handy with repairs, and I love decorating. It would be like having live-in property managers." Live-in property managers who'd never paid rent anywhere in their lives. "The kids would love having their Uncle David around more," Mom continued. "And honestly, that house you bought is pretty isolated. Wouldn't it be nice to have family close by for safety and companionship?" They were reframing my independence as loneliness and my personal space as wasted opportunity. Mom suggested I consider it an investment in family. That's when I finally said no. I'm not returning my house to buy a bigger one for Tyler's family. I told them calmly during our next family meeting. I bought a house that works for my life, and I'm keeping it. The silence that followed was deafening. You'd have thought I'd announced I was joining a cult or moving to another country. Mom's mouth actually fell open. Dad looked like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have an answer. But what about Tyler's family?" Mom stammered. "What about them? Tyler is 32 years old. If he needs housing for his family, he can find a job and rent an apartment like every other adult in America." Tyler's face went red. "That's pretty cold, bro. We're talking about your nieces and nephew here. I'm talking about boundaries and independence and not financing other people's life choices." They acted like I'd declared war on the family. The emergency family phone call came the next evening. Mom, Dad, Tyler, and Jessica all on speakerphone like they were conducting crisis intervention for a drug addict. "David, we've been talking and we think you might be making this decision out of stress," Dad began. "Buying a house is a big life change, and maybe you're not thinking clearly about what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone is Tyler getting a job. Jobs aren't that easy to find," Jessica jumped in. "Tyler's been looking, but the market is really competitive. Plus, we have to think about the kids' needs. We can't just uproot them for any random position. He's been looking for 8 months. Good positions take time," Mom said. "Tyler has standards. He's not going to take just any job that doesn't offer growth potential and family benefits." Standards. My unemployed brother living in our parents' basement had standards about employment. "Look," Dad said, his voice taking on that tone he used when he wanted to end arguments. "Tyler's situation is temporary, but those kids are getting older and they need stability now. Do you know how expensive it's getting to support 3 children? The food costs alone are killing us." There it was. Dad mentioned how expensive Tyler's kids were getting. The financial pressure on my parents was real. But instead of addressing Tyler's employment situation, they wanted me to solve it by becoming his landlord. When gentle persuasion failed, the threats began. "I think you're being incredibly selfish," Mom said during our final phone call about the house situation. "Those children need a stable home, and you have the power to provide it. Instead, you're choosing to live alone in a house that's too big for one person just to prove some point about independence." "Mom, it's a 3-bedroom house. It's not too big for anyone. It's too big for someone who doesn't want to share it with family. Maybe you need to think about what kind of person you want to be. Because right now you're putting your own wants above your family's needs, and that's not who we raised you to be." Jessica added her own guilt trip. "The kids ask why Uncle David doesn't want them to have their own bedrooms. What am I supposed to tell them? That their uncle thinks his extra space is more important than their happiness. Tyler jumped in too. You know what, David? Maybe this is good. Maybe the kids need to learn early that you can't count on family when things get tough. I just thought we meant more to each other than that." The manipulation was reaching nuclear levels. "You're destroying this family over selfishness," Mom said. "And for what? So you can have empty bedrooms while your nephew and nieces sleep in a basement." Mom said I was destroying the family over selfishness. The truth about my family's financial situation came from an unexpected source. Uncle Paul, Dad's older brother, who called me 3 days after the destroying the family conversation. "David, I need to tell you something your parents aren't going to tell you," he said. "I just had dinner with your dad, and he's in serious trouble. They both are." Uncle Paul had always been the straight-talking member of the family. While my parents spent years making excuses for Tyler, Paul had watched the situation with growing concern. "Your parents took out a second mortgage on their house 2 years ago," he continued. $38,000. You want to know what it went toward? Tyler's credit card debt, Jessica's medical bills from when Sophie was born, and a down payment on that car Tyler crashed 6 months later. The numbers were staggering, but Uncle Paul wasn't finished. "Their credit cards are maxed out. $12,000 on one, $8,000 on another. Your mother borrowed against her teacher's pension to cover Tyler's family's living expenses last year. They're paying minimum payments on everything, and your dad's talking about working until he's 70 because they can't afford to retire." Uncle Paul told me what they weren't saying about money. The financial reality was worse than I'd imagined. My parents weren't just supporting Tyler's family. They were drowning, trying to keep them afloat, and Tyler had no idea how much his lifestyle was costing everyone. "Here's what really bothers me," Uncle Paul continued. "Tyler doesn't know about the second mortgage. He doesn't know about the credit card debt. He doesn't know your mother borrowed from her pension. They've hidden all of it from him because they don't want him to feel bad about needing help. So he just thinks the money appears by magic." Exactly. And Jessica's even worse. She posted on Facebook last week about being blessed with such supportive in-laws, while your parents are literally sacrificing their retirement to pay for her family's groceries. The disconnect was staggering. Tyler and Jessica thought they were receiving generous family support, while my parents were quietly destroying their financial future to provide it. "Your dad mentioned that Tyler's been complaining about the basement being too cramped. Said Tyler suggested your parents should move to a smaller place so Tyler's family could have the main house. Can you believe that they needed Tyler to succeed because they couldn't afford him failing?" Uncle Paul's revelations prompted me to do some math of my own. I'd been wondering for years why my achievements were always met with polite indifference while Tyler's failures prompted family emergency meetings. The numbers told the story. Tyler's college education, $42,000 over 6 years. My college education, $0 from my parents, $28,000 in student loans I'm still paying. Tyler's car purchases 3 cars over 8 years, totaling $31,000 in family-funded down payments and loan co-signing. My transportation used cars. I bought and maintained myself. Tyler's housing costs. Free basement apartment for 1 year, plus utilities. Food and childcare support. Estimated monthly value, $2,200. My housing costs. Paid by me since age 18. Tyler's emergency bailouts. Credit card debt. Relief medical bill, assistance utility deposits, car repairs, and miscellaneous loans that were never repaid. Conservative estimate over the past 5 years, $23,000. The math was devastating. My parents had invested over $98,000 in Tyler's adult life, while investing $0 in mine. And Tyler had no idea how much he actually cost. The numbers showed exactly who the real investment was. But the most revealing discovery came when I finally understood why my family was so desperate for me to accommodate Tyler. It wasn't about family togetherness or the kids' well-being. It was about financial survival. My parents couldn't afford to support Tyler's family much longer, but they couldn't bear to cut him off either. Their solution was to transfer that responsibility to me through guilt manipulation and family obligation rhetoric. They wanted me to become Tyler's new funding source, starting with free housing, and probably progressing to all the other support they could no longer afford to provide. The housing demand wasn't about helping Tyler's family. It was about saving my parents from bankruptcy while maintaining the golden child illusion that had cost them their retirement security. I decided to give them exactly what they'd given me. With Uncle Paul's information and my own financial calculations, I had everything I needed to end this housing conversation permanently. But I wanted to do it right, methodically, publicly, and with enough evidence that no one could claim I was being unfair or selfish. I spent the next 2 weeks organizing my documentation. Bank statements showing my student loan payments versus Tyler's zero educational debt. Printouts of my parents' public records showing the second mortgage Uncle Paul had mentioned. Screenshots of Jessica's Facebook posts about being blessed with supportive in-laws, while those same in-laws were borrowing against their retirement to fund her lifestyle. The evidence was damning, but I needed the right venue. A private family conversation would just lead to more manipulation and gaslighting. I needed witnesses, people who could see the truth and couldn't be swayed by my parents' version of events. Thanksgiving dinner would be perfect for family truth-telling. My extended family would be there. Uncle Paul, Aunt Linda, my cousins, who'd heard years of stories about Tyler's struggles and my supposed selfishness. The perfect audience for some long overdue honesty about who had been supporting whom in this family. But first, I had to decide what this confrontation would cost me personally. There was a real possibility that calling out my family's financial manipulation and Tyler's decades of dependency would end our relationships permanently. I thought about family dinners, where I'd been ignored, while Tyler's latest crisis dominated every conversation. I thought about birthday celebrations where my achievements were mentioned briefly before pivoting to Tyler's needs. I thought about holidays, where I brought gifts for everyone, while Tyler's family arrived empty-handed, with explanations about tight finances. I realized I'd been paying for their love with my silence. The relationships I was afraid to lose had never really existed in the first place. My family didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. Quiet compliance with their favoritism system. A convenient scapegoat when Tyler needed someone to blame for his problems. A future safety net when their golden child strategy inevitably collapsed. The family that demanded I sacrifice my dream house for Tyler's comfort had never sacrificed anything for my dreams. "We're family" had always been code for David should provide what Tyler needs. The final preparation phase involved one more conversation with Uncle Paul to confirm his willingness to back up his revelations publicly, and a strategic decision about how much truth to reveal at once. "You sure you want to do this?" Uncle Paul asked. "Your parents are going to be humiliated. Tyler's going to be devastated when he learns how much his lifestyle has actually cost them." They should be humiliated, and Tyler should have learned that information years ago instead of being shielded from the consequences of his choices. What about the kids? The kids will be better off when their parents finally face reality about employment and independence. Right now, they're learning that responsibility is optional, and that family members exist to solve your problems for you. So I prepared a simple folder with documentation. The mortgage records, the loan comparisons, Jessica's Facebook screenshots, and a timeline of Tyler's employment history versus his family's financial support. They wanted to see my house, so I'd show them exactly who owned it. Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house was exactly what I'd expected. The extended family was there: Uncle Paul, Aunt Linda, my cousins Mike and Sarah, even Great-Aunt Betty, who only came to major holidays. The dining room table was crowded with the usual suspects, and the conversation flowed with the typical mix of work updates, sports commentary, and family gossip. Tyler sat at the head of the table opposite Dad Jessica, beside him acting like the patriarch of his own little kingdom. The kids were at the smaller table in the kitchen, far enough away to miss the adult conversations, but close enough for Jessica to periodically call out reminders about eating their vegetables. Mom had outdone herself with the meal, which made sense. This was probably the most expensive dinner they'd host all year, considering their current financial situation. I watched Dad carve the turkey with hands that shook slightly, wondering if the tremor was from age or stress about the bills piling up at home. "David, how's the new house?" Aunt Linda asked during the main course. "Your mother mentioned you bought a lovely place." Before I could answer, Mom jumped in with her own spin. The golden brother was about to lose his shine permanently. "Oh, it's nice, but we've been discussing whether it's really the right fit for David's needs," Mom said, glancing meaningfully around the table. "It's quite small for family gatherings. Only 3 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms for one person seems like plenty," Uncle Paul said, giving me a knowing look. "Well, that's the thing," Dad chimed in. "We're hoping David might consider something bigger. Something that could accommodate Tyler's family when they need it. The kids are getting older and they really need stable housing." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "The basement situation is getting really difficult. Emma needs her own space for homework, and the boys are constantly fighting because they have no room to play." Tyler leaned back in his chair. "We found some great 5-bedroom places in David's neighborhood. Perfect for extended family living. The kids would finally have their own rooms, and Jessica could have space for her crafts." "It would be such a blessing," Mom added. "David's doing so well financially, and Tyler's been looking for work, but you know how difficult the job market is. Family has to help family through tough times." Tyler started talking about the kids needing stability and space. "Plus," Jessica continued, "David's house sits empty most of the day while he's at work. It seems wasteful when there are children who need proper bedrooms. The kids ask me why Uncle David doesn't want them to have their own rooms." The manipulation was in full swing, but this time they had an audience. My cousins were looking uncomfortable. Great-Aunt Betty was frowning. Uncle Paul was watching me like he was waiting for a show to start. "You know what, Mom?" I said, setting down my fork. "You're absolutely right that we should discuss housing and family finances. I've been doing some research on that topic." I pulled out the folder I'd prepared and set it on the table next to my plate. "Since everyone's here, let me share some interesting numbers about family support, and who's been helping whom over the years. The table went quiet. Tyler's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Tyler, do you know how much your college education cost? $42,000 over 6 years. My education cost our parents exactly $0 because I took out student loans that I'm still paying off. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Do you know about the second mortgage Mom and Dad took out 2 years ago? $38,000. Want to know what it paid for? Dad's face had gone white. Mom was making subtle hand gestures for me to stop. It paid for your credit card debt, Jessica's medical bills, and the down payment on that car you crashed 6 months later. Tyler's face showed genuine confusion. What second mortgage? The one they didn't tell you about because they didn't want you to feel bad about needing help. Or maybe the $12,000 in credit card debt they've accumulated covering your family's living expenses. Or Mom borrowing against her teacher's pension to keep your lights on. I told them exactly how much their golden child had cost them. The silence at the table was deafening. Great Aunt Betty was staring at Tyler like she'd never seen him before. My cousins were looking back and forth between my parents and Tyler like they were watching a tennis match. Jessica had tears in her eyes. I've done the math, I continued calmly. Over the past 8 years, Tyler's adult lifestyle has cost our parents approximately $98,000. Want to know how much my adult lifestyle has cost them? $0. Tyler was shaking his head. I didn't know about any loans. Why didn't you tell me? Because they've been protecting you from the consequences of your choices your entire life, I said. And now they want me to take over that job by housing your family in a bigger house that I'll buy with my money. I stood up and gathered my papers. Speaking of houses, Tyler, yours is ready for a tour. The confusion on his face was perfect. My house, where you'll see exactly how much space one self-sufficient adult actually needs. Everyone's invited. Get my house, my rules, my family now. The aftermath of Thanksgiving dinner was swift and decisive. By the end of the weekend, Tyler had moved out of my parents' basement. Not into a bigger house, but into a 1-bedroom apartment he could barely afford, with the part-time job he suddenly found when free housing disappeared. Jessica's Facebook posts about blessed in-laws stopped abruptly. Instead, her updates became a stream of job hunting announcements and requests for babysitting help from friends. The craft room she'd planned for my house became a corner of their tiny living room, where she started selling homemade jewelry to supplement Tyler's income. My parents' financial crisis accelerated without Tyler's buffer, but it also forced long overdue conversations about realistic retirement planning and actual budgeting. Dad started working with a financial counselor. Mom began substitute teaching extra days to rebuild her pension contributions. Uncle Paul told me that Tyler had called him crying after discovering the full extent of his family's financial sacrifice. I didn't know, he kept saying. I thought they wanted to help. I didn't know it was costing them everything. The golden child finally learned what self-sufficient actually meant. As for me, I'm enjoying my perfectly sized house with its 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and complete absence of entitled family members measuring the walls for their furniture. The guest room stays empty most of the time, which is exactly how I like it. The mortgage payment is manageable because I chose a house I could afford, not one that accommodated other people's unrealistic expectations. The silence on weekday evenings is peaceful because I'm not fielding phone calls about Tyler's latest crisis or my obligation to solve it. My family still contacts me occasionally, but the tone has changed completely. Mom asks how I'm doing without suggesting how I could be doing it better. Dad shares news about his progress with debt consolidation without hinting that I could help speed up the process. Tyler sends brief updates about his job search without mentioning housing arrangements. They learn to respect my boundaries because I finally enforced them. They learned to value my independence because I stopped compromising it for their comfort, the best part. Every "that's nice, David" response from the past makes perfect sense now. My achievements were never minimized because they didn't matter. They were minimized because they made my family uncomfortable about their choices to enable Tyler's failures. Now, when I share good news, the responses are genuine congratulations instead of polite dismissals. Not because my family suddenly became more supportive, but because they finally understand that their financial survival depends on respecting the only family member who figured out how to be self-sufficient. The golden child system died the day I stopped funding it.